they've been at it for a long time now, but we're very excited and proud of them to have also done the MIT Executive Education Design Thinking course. This is exciting because, design thinking is the new thing now. That's what a lot of companies are that's the approach they are taking to problem solving, because it's become very clear that user centricity leads to a higher instance of discovering innovation, and also just builds innovation portfolios of companies more stronger, because it comes with deeper insights than the competition has. So you see that a lot of a few companies have sort of approached design thinking in a different way. Like IBM has an enterprise approach to design thinking. Universities and other trainers have also sort of carved out their own sort of niche or peculiar way of teaching design thinking, or doing design thinking. So we're very excited to hear from Dr. Abi and Philip today about what MIT means when they say design thinking. So without much ado, Matt, I hope that was a good enough intro.
Yes, that was
I'll
good.
turn it back to you, unless, of course, you want me to.
I think you can go ahead and then hand it over to Dr. Abi and Philip to take over.
Okay. All right. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Abi and Philip. I was going to do introductions, but I'll leave you to do it if you promise that you're not going to be. You're going to do full introductions and not be otherwise I'll come back and reintroduce.
Okay, Doc Abi, you can go, and then I'll come.
Okay, let me see whether I can find my video. I'm not sure whether my camera is showing though. I've put it on, but good evening, everyone. I'll try and show it during the course. I don't know why it's not showing, but Dr. Gordon has caught me off guard, because I was going to say I wear many hats, and I was just going to stick to the fact that I was a facilitator at Design Thinking Ghana, but he says he doesn't want a short introduction. So let me try and introduce myself. So my name is Abna Engman, but everybody calls me Dr. Abi, which is fine, because I have had challenges with my name being mentioned or pronounced by people who are not from Ghana. So I stuck to Abi. I don't want to try and say how people pronounce my name, because you end up laughing. So I'm actually a banker by profession. I have a background in banking. I worked in banking for 15 years. And I held various managerial positions whilst I was in the bank. And then I transitioned to academia. I became a research development officer. And then I joined Ashesi, supporting teaching and research. And last year, Ashesi decided to open an entrepreneurship center to operationalize the entrepreneurship ecosystem. So that is a brief introduction about me. I hope, Dr. Gordon, I've done justice to that. Philip, I hand over to you now.
All right.
So what do you do? What do you do at the Entrepreneurship Center?
Oh, I am the manager of the Entrepreneurship Center, the first manager of the center, actually.
Okay. All right. So Abi, you're done, right? You're done with your.
Yes, I'm done. So after you introduce yourself, you can jump right in. Yes.
All right. Sure. All right. So my name is. Good evening, everybody. My name is Theodore Philip Asare. Currently, I'm the Executive Vice President for Theovision International, which is a Christian non-for-profit organization that reaches rural people in Ghana. Aside that, I was part of the founding members of the Ashesi Design Lab, and Dr. Domja has been my boss for like forever, you know, working on the Ashesi Design Lab. And from there, I've also taught at Ashesi University. I'm an adjunct faculty at Ashesi University. I teach a freshman course called Foundations of Design and Entrepreneurship, where we talk about design thinking and entrepreneurship, the fusion of design thinking and entrepreneurship. And yes, that's a little about me. I don't know if I'm missing anything, but yes, that's a little about me. And we are excited to share what we learned at MIT with design thinking. And today we are just going to discuss and talk a little bit about that. But before we start, so that's just a short intro. So we're just going to jump straight in. Before we start, we want to ask a question. What are your expectations? So if let's say you were going to do an MIT design thinking course, what will be your expectations for that program or for that course? Or just see yourself like you are in the MIT setting. What would you envision their approach to design thinking? So I'll give us probably some few minutes to just think about this question, and we want to see some responses. You can write it down in the chat box, what you envision the MIT will call design thinking, and your expectations for that, for this program. If you were supposed to do it yourself, what would be your expectations? So I would give some few minutes to think about it, and then just write your responses in the chat box. It'll be great to see everybody type something. So I'll go over the question again. What will be your expectations if you were going to take this MIT design thinking course, or what do you envision an MIT design thinking course, and how would it look like for you? Or what would be your expectations for that program? I hope my question is clear. And probably after. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Adeno, for that. We'd like to see some more responses in the chat box. Okay. All right, noted. Adeno. Any other responses? Expectations? All right, Matthew, thank you for sharing. Any other? Yes, Nee, thank you for sharing. Problem solving from first principles, okay? Matt is saying understanding customer needs, solving creatively. And Adenor says walk through use case and track successes post-implementation. Wow, okay, good. Can we hear from some more people on what your expectations will be if you were the one taking an MIT design thinking course? Okay, just type it in the chat box. Okay, thank you, William. My expectations of an MIT DT will be a detailed process in reimagining problems that applies tested methodologies demonstrated through real life cases. So, right, great. Thank you so much, William. It's good to see you here, William. Yeah. If we can get one more, and then we can continue. One more. Your expectations of an MIT DT course, if you are the one taking it, and how would that look like for you? Just one more response, and then I'll hand over to Doc Abby to continue. Any other? One more? We just need one more. So we can move straight in. Okay. So maybe we'll just go straight in. Thank you for sharing. Those of you who shared your thoughts, thank you for sharing your expectations. Today we will just be sharing, and we are hoping that probably it might meet your expectations, or we'll find out what some of the differences are in the approaches. So I'll hand over to Dr. Abby to come in, and then I'll come in right after her. All right, over to you, Dr. Abby.
Thank you, Uncle Phil, and thank you everyone for your responses. And as you can see, I am showing the MIT slides so that at least you know that, yeah, we really did go to MIT. So we just picked the slides as they were given to us so that you can have a feel of MIT as well. So before we start going through the slides, I just wanted to say that this course was delivered 90% or let's say 70% virtual. The tool that was used to deliver the course was Canvas. And for those of you who don't know what Canvas is, it's an online educational tool which you can use to teach any course. You can upload videos, you can upload slides, you can have discussions, you can do everything that you can do in a classroom on Canvas. And it was Canvas that was used to deliver this course. We just had 3 live Zoom sessions with the originators of this course. It was just 3 live sessions. All the other weekly sessions were with FIs, faculty interns, or what we know as teaching assistants, and they used to call that one office hours. And those office hours were just on top of what other material they had put on Canvas. So every week you were required to go through some amount of material, complete individual assignments in between, complete quizzes in between, and also complete team assignments in between. And you needed to finish every single one of them. If at the end of the course you didn't finish, you do not get your certificate at all. And everything was marked, and you do get feedback from your assignments. All online, you have to go to Canvas to go and check. So they taught everything about design thinking that we know and more. Okay, sorry. They taught everything that we know about design thinking and more. And from your responses, yes, there were real case examples. There were videos that were played from products that had been designed using design thinking. There were case studies, there were discussions, and it was very much international. You had students from all over the world. I can't remember the number of countries, but in my team, and Philip was also part of my team, we're from 3 different countries already. And there were over 20 groups in the course. So that is just a brief background on how the course went. And in addition to the design thinking that we know, they added what we call new product development. And we picked a few of the topics that we thought were very different from what we know, and which really highlighted the new product development course that they added to the design thinking bits that we know already. So I will just start. Okay, so the first one that we wanted to share is about identifying customer needs. And what we know about this is that in the design thinking that we know, we usually talk about ethnographic research, where you need to go out and find out what are the real customer needs, what are their pain points, what are their desires to solve that problem that they are experiencing. So in the same way where we tell our participants and our students to go out and collect data so that they can empathize with the customer, with the user that they are solving the problems for, they also tell us you need to go and find out what the real customer needs are. And then usually when we come back, what we teach is that when you come back, you need to do affinity mapping, you need to do sense making, where the data that you have collected, you try to group them under various various buckets or various headings. So you group the data they have identified, and then you say, okay, these are things that walk, these are things that crawl, these are things that fly. you do label them. In the MIT course, what they do is that, so you define the scope. What are you going to research about? What is the kind of problem that you want to solve? We decided to solve something on mental health. And a little later, Philip will tell you about how we decided to work on a mental health problem. And then the gathering the information. So that is the ethnographic research I was talking about. Then the new steps, or what was new to us, are the next 3 ones, which is interpreting the customer data, quantify relative importance, reflection, and feedback. So the first 2 are the same, just like we know in design thinking. But then the challenge comes on how they interpret their customer data. So they don't do the affinity mapping bits that we know. But what they do is that they pick the actual customer statements. So for instance, you went out and wanted to find out about how people fulfill their nutritional needs in the morning. And then Philip will say, I like my cocoa hot in terms of heat. Somebody will also say, I like my cocoa hot in terms of pepper. So I don't like to drink cocoa in the morning. I prefer to take a beverage. So what they will ask you to do is to actually pick the real customer statements. What have customers actually said concerning the problem or the challenge that they are facing? So you need to write them out. And then the skills that you know about affinity mapping comes in here, where you try to gather the customer statements that you have and group them according to various brackets as to how they make meaning to you. And you realize that there are some items that are in bold and some that are not in bold. The ones in bold are the primary needs. So when we come to affinity mapping, the ones in bold are actually how the label that we've decided to put on the information that we have sorted. And then we have what we call latent needs, but Philip will talk about latent needs a little bit. So instead of just gathering the information, you need to listen to the customer and pick the statements that express their concern, that express their pain points. Now, you cannot just write down the customer statements just as like you heard them, but there are guidelines as to how you should interpret those statements that you have collected before you put them in a list like this. So what are the guidelines? The first one is that when you pick a customer statement, they say, I would like to use my iPhone to adjust my thermostat. You think about the what, not the how. So what exactly does he want his thermostat to do? The right way to say the thermostat can be controlled remotely without requiring a special device. So that is how you, the researcher, you, the DT specialist, is supposed to interpret the statement. Don't think about the what. Sorry, don't think about the how, but think about the what. What exactly is it that your user wants to do? So the wrong way to say it is that the thermostat is accompanied by a downloadable iPhone app. What if the user doesn't have an iPhone? Does it mean that he cannot control his thermostat? So you don't think about the how, but you think about what the customer wants to do. The second guideline for interpreting the statements that you have collected from your customers is to be very specific. Okay, so the customer says, I have different heating and cooling systems. What exactly is the customer saying? You need to be specific. Don't say that the thermostat needs to do a lot of things or the thermostat is versatile. No, you need to say that what the customer is looking for is that when he buys the thermostat, he should be able to control separate heating and cooling systems. So you need to be specific, heating and cooling. Don't say the thermostat should be able to do many things or various things at the same time. That is the wrong way to interpret the statement. The next guideline is that you always have to think positive, no negative. Even if the customer says a negative statement, you have to interpret it in the positive way because that is the experience that you want to give the customer. So the statement that says, I get tired of standing in front of my thermostat to program it, that's a negative statement. So how can you change this one to think positive? So if you are developing or producing a thermostat for the customer, it should be such that he doesn't need to stand in front. But how do you interpret it? So you say that thermostat can be programmed from a comfortable position. You are not allowed to use the word not, does not, cannot, should not. Everything the customer says should be interpreted in the positive way. So you need to think about it. He said, I don't like my cocoa hot. How can you interpret that? Turn it into a positive statement. I like my cocoa to be cold. That is positive. Don't bring the word not. And then you also need to think about an attribute of the product. So the statement that says, I have to manually override the program if I'm home when I shouldn't be. It should be interpreted as, what can the product do? What should be the characteristic of the product? So here it says automatically responds to the customer's present. That should be an attribute of the product. So if you have a customer statement, you need to think about, okay, when my customer buys this product, what should be some of the features that the product should have? So this one says it should automatically respond. What you should also avoid is the word must and should. When you're interpreting your statement as a DT expert using the MIT approach, you are not allowed to use the words must and should. Okay, so the thermostat controls are secure from unauthorized access. So the customers worry about the fact that his thermostat is not secure and can be accessed by anyone, anywhere. You should not say must or should, but you should say the thermostat controls are secure from unauthorized access. So these were the guidelines that we were given. So all the data that we went out to collect, and we actually did go out to go and collect data. It didn't matter which part of the world you were in, whether you were in Botswana, you were in the UK, you were in Brazil, we all had to go out and collect data. So you can imagine collecting data from different countries. And then we had to come, apply these rules and interpret the information that we had all collected from where we found ourselves at. And Kofa, I hand over to you to continue from here on the latent need.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Abby. So as Dr. Abby rightly said, she has explained the guidelines on how you write your customer needs. But one thing that really came out strongly in the course was latent needs. You know, in design thinking, most of us here know about is we do a lot of observation, especially when you're doing your ethnographic research. There's observation, you go out to study your customers and interview your customers. And I'm sure some of you are wondering what are latent needs. And for the MIT program, it was explained that latent needs are the hidden needs that customers may not be aware of. So there are some needs that some of the customers don't know they have that needs, and they are not easily expressed. So it's very difficult for the customer themselves to even express that need. So if you even interview them, probably they might not tell you because they don't even know they have that need. All right. And they are hard to understand by talking to customers. You can't just talk to customers to identify latent needs. So then how do you identify latent needs? And during the course, it was explained that you have to really go through a thorough observation. So through carefully observing the user. All right. And we all know the importance of observation, but with this one, you're observing, looking out for latent needs, the needs that the customer does not even know they are experiencing or they have. All right. And the question is, what is the advantage of identifying latent needs? And when latent needs are addressed, product may delight or even exceed the customer's experience or expectation, because then you actually have gone beyond what they even know or what they even think that is the need for them. But probably there's another need that they themselves don't really know that is a need. Okay, so as Doc Abby has explained, writing out the customer statement, not just writing out the customer statement and using those guidelines, but you also have to use observations to identify customer needs, especially with the latent ones. Next slide, please, Doc Abby. So one thing that came out strongly was that, which was a bit different, was after you spell out those customer needs and identify your latent needs, it was very, very important for you to translate those needs into specifications. Now, Dr. Abby spoke about how the product development process was used throughout the course in relation to design thinking. And at this point, it looks at the concept development stage in the product development process, where at this point, after you identify your customer needs, you have to now establish target specifications. And these specifications are what you translate the needs from to get those specifications that you're looking at. All right. So you don't just talk about the needs, but you try and talk about what are the specifications in relation to that need. So for example, if someone says, my phone should be able to fit in my pocket, all right, you also have to look at what size should the phone be, okay? How heavy should the phone be in order to enter the person's pocket, all right? So you have to think about the specifications in relation to the needs you identified from your research. Next slide. So there are two questions you have to ask when you are thinking about translating the needs into specifications. So you have to ask, how will we measure it? So the needs that you have identified from the user, or identify the latent need, how are you going to measure it? Or what is the right value in those measurable terms? Okay, so you have to think about what are the right values that you are going to use in measuring what you have identified. Now, there are parts of specifications. There are three major parts. It can come in either in the metric form, or you can look at the value or the units. Okay, so for example, you can see an example in the slide where the metrics of a measurement, for example, for a product or a need was total mass. You don't just talk about the total mass, you have to look at the units in which total mass is measured, and then look at the specific value. That helps you really narrow and go deeper into the needs that you have identified. Then whatever you are creating is actually targeted to the user's needs, because then you have been able to translate those needs into specifications. Next slide, please. All right, so these were some examples that we used, that was used in the MIT course, where it spoke about the suspension fork, or the mountain bike suspension fork, which some of you might not know of, but it's a device that you could put in front of a mountain bike to help with the stability of the bike, and to help in your shocks, especially when you're climbing mountains and stuff like that. And you in this table, you can see that there are a number of needs from the user, all right? But some of these needs can have probably the same metric or the same unit or the same value. So you can see that it's grouped in a way where you are translating what you have identified from the user into specifications. So what are the metrics? So for example, in the table below, you can see the need 1 and need 3. The metric for that is, I can't really see that properly, but you can see that on the screen, and then you can see the values and then the units for that matrix. All right. So then you are linking everything to a specification. All the needs are narrowed down into specifications to help you go deeper into the customer needs. Next slide. Yes. So for this, it can also help you in benchmarking. So for example, if you have different companies looking at a product, all right, it can help you really narrow down and see what the needs are and actually map it out in order to understand what the metrics are, what the customer needs are in relation to that company. All right, so here you can see about 6 competitive products, all right, and then they are being benchmarked against each of the needs accordingly. So you can see some scores by them, all right? And this was a very interesting way for us to really delve deep into the customer to design something that they really need, okay? Next slide. Okay, so I'll hand over to Doc Abby. We spoke about design, not just design for products, but also looking at design thinking with services. So over to you, Dr. Abby.
Thank you, Uncle Phil. Yep. So they had a special session on design for services. And one thing that they said that resonated, I hadn't really thought about it that much, that unlike a product, a service is consumed as soon as it is produced. So as soon as the service is produced, it is consumed. So you go to a restaurant, food is cooked immediately, you buy, you eat, and that's it. That's the end of the service. You go to the barbering shop, as soon as they cut your hair, you enter, they cut your hair, you finish consuming the service. So because of that, we are all aware of journey mapping, and we do journey mapping when it comes to the design thinking that we know. But they introduced something that they call the service cycle map for services. And like I said, I have a banking background, so I like the banking examples. So they gave an example about Bank of America, where they wanted to inculcate savings habits into their customers. So as a bank, definitely you have a product or that's called a savings account, or you have different types of savings accounts. So if you were to draw your journey map, you the customer thinks about having a bank account because he's got a new job. He thinks about the bank that he wants to open the account with, the type of account he wants to open. He speaks to friends, he goes online, he gets recommendations, he walks into your bank, you take his KYC documents, you open the account for him, and then you open a current and a savings account for him. So that would be a typical journey map. But then when you think about that, banking is actually a service. So what Bank of America did was to innovate their savings accounts by encouraging people to save more. And what did they do? So one of the first things that they did was to have deals with other companies like Starbucks. And then they got deals for their customers. So if I wanted to buy coffee, instead of going to, let's say, another shop, maybe Vida Cafe in Ghana, where I'll buy a coffee for $3. If I go to Starbucks as an American bank customer, I'll get the coffee at $2.50. So it means I can save the $50. So the other thing that they also did was that, okay, if you go and you purchase something and the cost of the item is $5.79, what they actually did was that they will bill your card, which is your credit card or your debit card, they will round it up to the nearest whole number. So if it's $5.79, they will actually charge your card $6. And then the difference between that, which is 21 cents, goes straight into your savings account. So you realize that the journey map is there, but like I said, banking is also a service. So they innovated that last part of the journey map, thinking about the circle. How do you get people actually to put money into that savings account? So they picked that part of the customer assessing their product or their service and innovated on that part. And I'll take you to the movies very soon because not everybody who likes banking. But when they talk about the service experience cycle, they talk about, okay, the customer desires to do something. So I'm hungry. So I desire to go and buy food. So I shop around, I ask people, I go online, I think about what I have bought before, what appealed to my taste palettes, and then I decide, okay, I'll go and purchase it. I purchase the pizza, I consume it, I think about it. Did I like it or I didn't like it? And then the cycle starts all over again. So that is actually a service. So thinking about a service experience cycle map, this is how it happens. The customer has a desire to open an account, goes online, asks friends which bank, goes to open the bank account, uses his checkbook, uses his Visa card, thinks about the experience, and then it starts all over again. So I told you I'll take you to the movies. So this is a movie service cycle experience map that they shared with us, and it was quite interesting. So the first thing is there's a movie theater. You advertise your movie theater either by word of mouth or you create awareness. Once you create the awareness, the customer will think, okay, do I plan to go or do I compare with other sources of entertainment or other movie theaters. And then you plan to arrive at the place, you purchase a ticket, maybe you buy food, Coke, popcorn, you get seated, you look at the previews of other movies, other adverts, you enjoy the food, you enjoy the film, you leave, and then word of mouth, you also advertise, and then the cycle still continues. But the interesting thing here is that at each of these touch points, you could actually decide to innovate. So for instance, at the seating, you could think about the fact that, okay, you could provide different seating spaces for people who come. Do you want to provide family seating? Do you want to provide seating where people can actually eat? Do you want to provide seating for young adults? So you could innovate just on the seating. How about purchase of food? How do you want the customer to purchase the food? Do you want to offer the customer a discount when they buy the food, ordering the food while they are buying the tickets? Or they could purchase the food when they get there, which will be at a higher price. So at each of these touch points, you have the opportunity to come up with an innovation. So you realize that even when you draw your journey map and you pick those individual items, and in the next couple of slides, you see where we actually learned about how some products have joined, have also come up with service innovation for their product, and they're delivering both together. So when we are innovating in services, we are encouraged to come up with service experience cycles and then think about the various touch points and see where you can innovate. This is called Zipcar. So what this product actually is that you have an opportunity to rent a car and use it. And this was developed by an MIT student. The person finished school, I think about 10 years ago, and she came up with this product where you could subscribe, apply for membership, and then if you needed a car, you just go online, reserve the car. They will show you where the car is. You go and pick it up, you use the car, and then you come and park it back at the same spot because of parking, and also when other people are looking for the car, they can find it. So it is actually a service of renting a car. But when you think about this service cycle map, you realize that there are different aspects to it. When you want to apply for the service, there's a membership process flow where you as the user, there's a process that you have to go through before you can use the service. And then there's the back end where the booking process actually takes place. And then there's the vehicle process flow, where after people have used the vehicle, it needs to be repaired. You need to think about servicing. You need to think about parking. So if you take your time and break down the service into these parts, you realize that there are various touch points where you could innovate the service that you are giving to the users. For instance, if you look at receiving application, how do you want the customer to receive the application? By mail, online? Does he have to walk to a certain office to do that? Can they do it at different organizations? Can they do it at the post office? When you look at another point, let's see, process billing. Does the customer receive instant billing on their phone? Is it sent to them at the end of the month? So you can look at various touch points if you try and break down the the service into different touch points. And then you have a bigger and better look at it. And this service can actually be for your product as well. So assuming that Zipcar was producing their own cars for sale, so that would be a product, and this could be an additional service. And within that service cycle, you can have different touch points where you can innovate as well. So like I was saying earlier, there are products that have services as well. So think about iPhone. They have the iPhone, and then they have incorporated the MP3 bundles, and they're delivering the iTunes service together with the iPhone that you have. Thinking about Dropbox, people used to carry around external drives to store their things, but now they are giving you the same product of having easy access to your files and information, but they are delivering it online. Thinking about pizza, when you're designing a product like pizza, you can think about it like a product. So pizza, you have the dough, you have the toppings, you have the meat, but then there's a huge variety that people can choose from. And at each point in time, your customers can decide which of the services they want, even though you are selling pizza, which is a service. So you can have kids pizza, you can have vegetarian pizza, you can have meat pizza. So when you're thinking about your product, there could be a service that you could deliver in addition. How do you merge the two, and what are the different touch points that you can innovate in? Over to you, Uncle Phil.
All right, thank you, Dr. Abby. Yeah, so that was really interesting, learning that the service experience cycle. And one thing that also interests us was the environmental sustainability, thinking about the environment. Next slide. And in design thinking, we get to a point where we are prototyping and we get to design products. But in the MIT course, the goal was for us to think about the environment. So what do we need design for the environment for? And what are some of the environmental issues? And now when you think about the environment, there are two main problems. It's either an energy problem or a material problem. Okay, so for the energy problem, you have global warming that is created by burning fossil fuels. Material problems, you can look at the depositing materials back on the earth creates pollution. All right, so you look at pollution with the materials that you use for your product. And some of the solution, especially for the energy problem, designing in a way that it consumes less energy or uses cleaner energy. So you're not just designing, yes, you're thinking about the user, you're thinking about the needs. When you get to the prototyping stage, you have to think. MIT is big on thinking about the environment as well. So designing, taking note of the issues or the problems that occurs in the environment, either pollution or anything that actually can affect the environment. All right, and then most of the waste produced, if you could go back to most of the waste produced is not useful for the new product. So sometimes the materials that we use, we realize that the waste that comes out is actually not useful if you want to use that again for a new product. So that's something that we actually looked at also. Next slide. Yes, so what is designed for the environment? So in MIT, they explained it as is the method to minimize or eliminate environmental impacts of a product over its life cycle. So you're looking at how you can, minimize or just eliminate the impact on the environment with a product that you come out with. And also it maintains or improves product quality and cost while reducing environmental impact. So you're not just thinking about the reduction in the impact or the impact on the environment, you're also thinking about how you can maintain or improve the product quality, and not just the quality, but the cost as well. Next slide. So there are types of environmental impacts. Sure, all of us know about this. We have global warming, we have resource depletion, we have solid waste, we have water pollution, we have air pollution, we have land degradation. And as a designer, especially when you get into your prototyping stage, you have to be thinking about all this and how your product or your service will impact the environment. Now you know the types of environmental impacts. So you have to think about this while you prototype or develop your product. Yes, next slide. So with the MIT course, they came up with some examples. All right. And one was the Dunlop Wellington boots. And these boots are recyclable. All right. So the goal for these boots they were made from polyurethane or PVC and rubber. And also they were developed, Dunlop developed a line of recycled boots. So they tried to develop the product where they could, the materials that were used should be able to, recycle those materials so they can be used again. And also Dunlop takes back used boots from customers for recycling. So part of their model was to take back boots that customers or users were not using anymore, and then recycle it into new boots. Okay, so the great thing about this is This helps to reduce the production of new PVC and keeps it out of the waste stream. So now with this, there's no waste. All right. So whatever the customers don't need again, you can take it back and then reuse it. Okay. So energy is required. Actually, you need energy for recycling. So yes, that's also a part that you also have to think about. There was also another example on a chair. It's a Stoke trap chair. And this is a chair that was developed by Peter. It was designed by Peter. And the goal for this chair was that it could be able to be used by a baby, a teenager, an adult, and then probably a mother. The same chair. You can use it for different users. Okay. And for this chair, reusing the product itself involves no take back. You don't take back the product or anything. So there's no recycling or no remanufacturing. It's the same chair that has been built, but you can adjust it. You can adjust it in a way where different users. So you can use it when you're a baby. When you grow up, you're a teenager, you can still use that same chair. You don't have to buy any new chair. And if you grow up, if you're a mother, you can even use that chair to study or use it in the kitchen, wherever you want to use it. So these were some of the interesting examples that when you're prototyping, you have to think about all these things while you design for your user. Next slide. Yes. So points to remember. So manufacturers need to be mindful of their disadvantages, actually. So you have to think about the disadvantage and communicate the knowledge to consumers. All right. Sometimes designers sometimes just design, and if there are disadvantages or if there are anything, they don't really communicate it with the user. But with design thinking, we know that we design around the user. So the user is very, very, very important. So knowing the disadvantages and communicating it to the user is very important. So each example has its own benefits. Some of the examples I explained, they have its own benefits. However, they also have some disadvantages as well, which you have to think about. And also you need to be mindful about those disadvantages while you design for the user. And they should create products which have less impact. So you should think about how the product will have a lesser impact on the environment. Next slide, please. All right. So for the product development process, as Dr. Abi spoke about, it was a big part of the course. But while you go through that process, you also have to embed the designing for the environment into the product development process. Okay, so when you get into the planning stage, you have to have goals. You have to start with what are you thinking about from the planning stage for the environment, okay? And then when you get into the concept development stage, you're also thinking about, designing for the environment and also thinking about material guidelines. So what are the kind of materials you would use for that product that you are designing? And also when you get into the detailed design, okay, you have to assess. So when you get into the prototyping stage, you have to assess the impact and then refine the design and based on what you get from your assessments. And then you improve on that, on the design for environment while you go through the process, because you learn from the whole process and then refine it and then improve on it. So you don't just go through the product development process, but you have to think about the environment. And that's one thing MIT really hammered during this course. Next slide, sorry. Yes, so there are some common guidelines for designing for the environment, which is one, I'll just touch base on just a few. Do not combine materials incompatible in recycling. You also have to label all components, materials for recycling, so that it's easy for you to get to the point where you're recycling. And also it should be easy for you to disassemble into separate material recycling streams, so that you can actually understand the various components, and then it makes it easy for you to break down and know which one will affect the environment, which one will not really affect the environment. And if possible, if you can eliminate packaging, because sometimes, packaging, what sometimes that can do to the environment. okay, or you can reduce the weight or reduce the size for shipping. Most designers these days are thinking about that moving forward. And there are also common material guidelines into what kind of materials you need to use. And those are some of them you can see on the screen, like capture and reuse all hazardous materials, use processes which do not release toxic materials. So all these things you have to think about when you're designing for your user. Next slide, please. Yes, so these are just some rules to follow with designing for the environment. So design products and processes with industrial materials that can be recycled continually. Design products and processes with natural materials that can be fully returned to the earth's natural cycles. And then also design products and processes that do not produce unnatural toxic materials. Not just that, you also have to design products and processes with clean, renewable source of energy. So these are some of the things or rules you can follow when you are building your products. Yes, so while you are developing your product, think about the impact of the product on the environment, okay? And using either the material or looking at the impact the material causes on the environment. And this one, you can see an example with laptops. You can see it has a high use of materials, and the recovery rate is also high. The use, the distribution and production, you can measure that and then see the impact it has on the environment. Next slide. Because of time, yes, I'll hand over to Doc Abby to continue.
Yes, so to make you happy, this is actually the last part we'll share, and then we'll go into a discussion. So we all know that when it comes to innovation, you need to think about three things. You think about feasibility, desirability, and viability. So their viability was more of a financial analysis class. And here they think about, they just don't think, you know, when you draw your business model canvas, you have cost and you have revenue. So they go a little bit deeper, thinking about cost and revenue. So they think about what cash flows can you get today and in the future that's going to be able to cover your cost of developing the product, your cost of launching the product, and your cost of selling the product. These are things that you really need to think about, and not just the revenue and the cost, but think about the cash flows, the amount of money you're going to spend. Sorry, I think I lost connection. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yes. So you think about the cash flows, your future cash flows, how much you are spending, developing, launching, and selling the product. So these are some questions they taught us to ask ourselves. Will it be profitable enough to pay back the initial investments? What if your projections are wrong? Your worst case should be that you should break even, so your costs are equal to your expenses. You ask yourself, is it worth to invest in expensive tooling and designing your product and in recycling? Do you need to really spend that much money? What if you cannot get that much back? Is it really necessary to spend that amount of money? So these are the things that you need to think about. So they use the an example from Nespresso. I'm sure we've all, those of us who have been to Marina Mall, realize that there are some people selling coffee as soon as you enter and you're going towards the supermarket. So this is the example, Nespresso, coffee that they sell. And the things that they thought about, or the example that they gave us to do the financial analysis, was they took into consideration the development and testing costs. So developing of the product, and then you have to go out and test whether your product really resonates for the people you designed the product for. How about the tooling investment, the equipment that you use to develop the product? Think about marketing. Think about how much sales are you going to make? How much did it cost you to produce 1 unit of your product? How much money are you going to get from selling 1 unit of your product? And if you're going to do recycling, how much is the recycling cost, and what's the rate that you are going to use to calculate the net present value of your cash flows? So these are the things that they used. And there's an example. It's actually a spreadsheet, and it had all these formulas inside. So we realized that the sales are there, the initial sales volumes are there, They're expecting it to grow at 15% in a year. They're expecting to sell 200,000 units in a year. The price for one unit is $260, and they are going to give it to distributors to sell. And of course, they have to give them a margin, so a 40% margin. And then sales volume of the capsules. So the first one was for the machine. Then you realize that this color was for the capsules, the coffee capsules. Then you realize they have product development cost, and costing them 5 million over 1 year. Equipment and tooling was costing them 4 million for 6 months. Market launching the product, 10 million for half a year. So all these costs, you need to think about them, and then what rate are you going to use to discount your cash flows to see whether you're breaking even or not. So this time it's not just the business model where you're looking at cost and revenue, but you're looking at your total cost of production, selling, and then calculating how much money you're going to get for each year, and what is the value of that money that you are projecting to get. What would be that value today, and are you going to break even? So those are the main things we realized were very different from what we know as design thinking. So we realized that there's a lot of new product development, new product development lessons from that. So I will share a book that was used to get the information. If you get that book, it's on new product development, and Eppinger was one of the co-authors of the book, and he was the main tutor of the MIT design thinking course. So if you grab that book, all these things are explained into details. But we also wanted to share some lessons that we learned from the teamwork. I'll take the first two, and then Uncle Philip will take the last two. So like I said, we were participants from different countries, and we had to choose. So what happened was that once you log into Canvas, the tool that we're using to deliver the course, you had to type in an idea. What would be the project that you want to work on? And then you had to go and choose a time within your country you could meet. So we usually had 8 p.m. to 12 midnight, and then maybe 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., depending on your time zone. So when each of us chose the project that we wanted to work on and put it in the chat, and then you chose the time, then you had other people also joining, and you couldn't be more than 5 in a group. So so we had to chat in Canvas to agree on the time that we'll meet. So we all agreed to meet on Sunday night at 8 p.m. And it was very important for us to set the rules during the first meeting. One, because of language barrier. Not everyone had their first language as English. And 2, because we had very different time zones. UK and Ghana, the time zones were not too different, but then we had a Jamaican and we had somebody from Brazil. So we set the rules at the beginning, and we agreed on our meeting times, which was very helpful. We never saw each other's face in person. It was all just talk. So we had to set the rules at the beginning. So if you are ever going to work in a team, we encourage you that set the rules from the onset, because sometimes it's 8 p.m. Nobody tells anybody to join the meeting. Everybody is there. And then when the person cannot show up, they send a message that I am stuck in traffic today, I cannot show up. And then the second point, recognizing people's strengths. Like I said, we had somebody from Brazil, somebody from Jamaica. And you realize that the person from Brazil was finding it a bit difficult to speak the English, but he was very good when it came to doing the team assignment, when it came to doing the calculation, the financial analysis, or getting anything done. He was very, very good at that. So we allowed him to play that role, and we didn't force him to speak very much at team meetings. And if he couldn't speak, we'll type in the chat and we'll support him on that. So those are some nuggets from me about doing teamwork, especially across boundaries. Uncle Philip, over to you.
All right, yes. So we also, one thing we learned was the process of choosing a project. So with MIT, what it did was, even though you have thematic areas, everybody will come up with an idea. And then there was a template where everybody puts their idea in that template, and then each person rates the project. So when we meet, you know, sometimes when you're having teamwork, people are discussing, I want my idea to go. I want my idea to be the one to pass. I want my idea. But with the MIT course, they structured it in a way where there was a rating system. So all of you rate, you can say, okay, if 3 people agree for us to go with this project, we all run and rally behind it. So we don't say because our idea was not taken, we don't like it, because it was very clear. Everybody rates the project they want. The one with the highest rating is what you go with. All right. So it was very fast in deciding on the project we really want to work on. Right. And then the last thing was every team member does the work as if it's an individual homework, because of the different time zones, because of where people were. What we did was we were able to assign tasks, and then everybody does the assignment. And then when we meet, everybody brings it on board. We discuss it, we share with the team, and then the team decides which one to pick. And then when we pick that one, all of us rally around it and then polish the idea. So it was a very seamless, especially our team. I loved our team a lot because it had different people, different strengths, but we're able to come together and achieve the goal that we wanted to achieve. So we worked on a project on mental health, as Dr. Abby talked about, where we had to do a lot of research, interview people. We came up with a product that can actually meet some of the needs that we really identified from the people we interviewed. I don't know whether, okay, that's the book you're sharing, Dr. Abby. So you can
Yes,
talk.
that's the book. Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Thanks for sharing. So that's the book right there. So you can check it out for some more information. Okay. All right. So that is what we learned. And if you have any questions, or if you, what do you see? Are there any similarities? What are some of the differences you notice? And are the differences? What is the gap we are seeing between what we know and what we just spoke about? It'll be great to hear from you as well. Okay. So maybe we'll open up for questions or any comments from anyone. Then over to you, Matt, if there's any.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Abby and Mr. Philip. That was a great presentation. So the floor is open for questions and answers. So if you have any question, just put up your hand. We'll give you the opportunity, ask your question. If you have comments as well, just let us know. And you can as well type your questions in the chat. Okay. Isaac, you are unmuted, so I guess you probably want to ask a question or say something.
I have one.
Okay, go.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Abby and Philip. It's very, very interesting, especially because, you know, Dr. Abby and I taught a course on new product development last 2 years, where we used the
last year. Yeah.
Last year, where we used the Epinga book. And, you know, Epinga, his main focus is lead user innovation. You know, this idea that every innovation, he did some research which showed that whatever innovation you take, it started from somebody who had a problem to solve, couldn't really find a solution, started figuring out a way to solve it. A company picks up the solution and makes it into a product. And he showed so many different examples of that. So this idea that innovation comes from users trying to solve their problems, but then they take this very technical approach to uncovering the needs and refining them and so forth. Tables, not visual pictures of connections between ideas as we do in traditional design thinking. And you guys are quite familiar with traditional design thinking. Do you get a sense that the MIT one is too technical, perhaps? Because you're looking at metrics and units and relative values and so forth. What's your sense of it?
Yeah. So Doc Abby, I'll go first and then maybe you can jump in. Yes, so it was a bit technical, Doc. It was a bit technical than what we already know. However, there were some importance in knowing those things. Even though it was technical, but at least having that idea and talking about specifications and the units, sometimes it's good to know about that, just so that when you're thinking through either a product or designing for someone, you're not just thinking vaguely or just in a, how do I put it, broad, but you're actually looking at some of these things that can help you in designing for your user. So it was a bit technical, that's true, because it was a bit new to us. That's why we spoke about it here, but we saw some importance in it as well. Doc Abby, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, Dr. Gordon, it's interesting that you asked, because I remember when we were teaching the new product development course last year. I remember the part about target specifications and specifications. And I remember when you were teaching that, it was a bit difficult for me to understand. And being the teaching assistant, I was always praying that no student should come to me to ask me a question about this one, because I myself, I'm struggling to understand that part. So when I took the MIT course and I had to go through it again, it actually gave me a better understanding. So it is a bit technical and does take a bit of time to understand. So that's why I point this one out here. And we also wanted to find out, do we think as a group here that we should incorporate the new product development into our traditional DT, or it should be taught separately, since DT is still quite new in Ghana?
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Abby and Philip. There was a question in the chat, you addressed it, but I feel not everyone is paying attention to the chat. So I want to read that and then you answer it. So there's the question of the frameworks and then the tools that you use during the practical sessions. Yeah, so if you can touch briefly on that.
I answered those questions in the chat. I don't know whether you saw them.
Yes, I saw that.
Yes,
that I feel not everyone is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we did use the traditional DT tools, most of them. We did use them, but we didn't talk about them here because we all know them already.
Right.
But we use, like I talked about Jenny maps, we talked about personas, we talked about what else? Yeah, everything that we know in the frameworks, reframing the questions, the how might we questions, the POVs, we talked about all of them.
Okay. So there's a follow-up question from Emmanuel. You've not seen that yet. He says that, how do you validate that an idea is worth pursuing, aside the fact that customers express diverse primary needs? As a business, when should you pursue an idea or concept? That's from the design thinking perspective.
Yeah. Okay. So how I'll answer that is testing whatever you design. So that's why we spoke, the MIT program spoke a lot about prototyping as well, and testing to get insights from the users. And then when you go back, you get feedback, you refine, you go back, you get feedback, you refine. So that can help you actually validate your idea or your design that you're developing. So that's how I will answer that.
Thank you, Philip. Emmanuel, I hope you've been answered. There's a new question from William. He says, were there new tools introduced aside the traditional tools that you talked about? Were there new tools introduced?
So for me, I would say the rating system, how we selected the project, especially when you're working in a team, how we selected the project to work on, I think was a new, I don't know whether it's a tool, but it was a good tool for us to use to just narrow down the project we really wanted to work on. And it was a bit fast, so we're able to decide on the project and just move on it. If everybody, let's say 3 people agree to go with this project, we all rate it. And then when we come, everybody defends why they are choosing this project and not that project. And then we talk about it, and then we go with the one that most people chose. And I think I would say that was something new. I don't know whether Dr. Abby.
Yeah. The other new thing was what we call the mission statement, which is a 1-page document.
Yeah.
And then that everybody will have, so that if we are going off your project, everybody has that document, and it talks about the problem that you are going to solve, who we are solving the problem for, who are the primary stakeholders, who are the secondary stakeholders, and information like that. So it's just a 1-sheet document, which we call the mission statement. So what are you trying to achieve as a team? It was like a guiding tool that you could use just to make sure that it didn't go off track. And then the other one that was introduced was also how to interpret the data that you collect from the field. So instead of just summarizing the data you have collected from the field, you actually pay attention to what the customers are saying. So you needed to make an extra effort of not just summarizing your interviews or your observation, but actually picking actual customer statements, and coming back to interpret them. And using those guidelines, those 5 guidelines were actually hard, where you wanted to use the words must and should, and you said you can't use it. He said don't use negative, use only positive. So those were 2 tools that were really new and helpful. And then I see that William also asked, I agree with Gordon, would you recommend this to a graduate level audience? I would say yes, because for instance, in HSC, we teach both courses. We teach design thinking and we teach new product development. So I think once you've gone through those courses, you can do this one as well. So that's how I'll answer that question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Abi. Emmanuel is asking a follow-up question again. He says, my question is really about, does desirability always translate into viability and feasibility? How do you know that the idea is viable and feasible? I'm talking from a business point of view. When should I invest in an idea? How does design thinking help me arrive at that decision with ease? Yeah, that's a number of questions, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe we can throw it up to.
Yeah, so the question is actually to all of us. It's we are all design thinking enthusiasts. Kofi, I see Kofi in the meeting. I see a lot of facilitators are also. The question is I think Emmanuel says that he's new to the design thinking space. So there's an opportunity to welcome him into the space by giving him the basics. Yeah, so the question.
I can take a stab. I can take a stab at it from the perspective of the IDEO triad, which at HSC we call the 3-legged stool. This idea that great business ideas are at the intersection of desirability, viability, and feasibility. I don't think the point is that desirability always, let me see how it was phrased, always translates into viability and feasibility. Desirability just says that you are looking at a problem that solves a pain point and goes beyond that to provide a level of desirability to the customer. So you're not only solving the customer's need, providing functionality, you're going beyond functionality to blow their minds. That's where desirability comes in, right? But once you have that, then you need to take it into feasibility and viability analysis. At HSC and also in DTGH, what we use is we call something the value fulfillment blueprint, which helps you outline the different steps so basically is a journey map for the user, but then you try to understand how you can support each point of the journey map. And once you develop this blueprint, it becomes very clear to you which areas are feasible and which ones are not, right? And then you move it into a business model canvas, which gives you viability, because the two bottom parts of a business model canvas are your cost structure and your what is it? Benefits, something benefits. I'm drawing a blank. And you know that your business model, your business is viable by comparing the cost structure to the customer revenue, right? To the customer revenue on the right side, right? Of course, a business model canvas doesn't do a thorough job of all your capturing all of your finances, but it does give a good sense of your cash flows. So at a snapshot, you'll be able to know whether the venture generates enough gross margins, for instance, for you to be able to take costs out. So I think what has happened is that business development has moved to this sort of lean startup prototypical approach, where you can basically test your assumptions, around desirability by putting the product in front of people or a version of it to see how they respond. Test your assumptions around feasibility and viability by running these minimum viable product test experiments to see whether you can really get some traction in terms of the output of the experiments, to see how feasible, how viable they would be if you launch them in real life. So I think that there are ways of, those are some of the ways of doing a quick and dirty check on whether an idea is worth pursuing or worth investing into. And it's being used by a lot of investors these days. A lot of investors don't want to read a 50-page business plan. They want to see your business model, right? And want to see what MVP tests you've conducted. And these tests are on feasibility and viability, and also checking for desirability. I don't know if, I hope that's helpful, but of course, there are so many other people who teach this stuff and practice this stuff on the page, or on the call.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Gordon. Kofi, your hand is up. Just unmute and speak.
Right, thanks, Matthew. And Gordon shared a lot of my views on this. I think I'll quickly add that, Ima, it's neither of the three, right? So we usually will talk about all three. And the sweet spot for your business is when you are able to crack all three, but you never really crack it before you start, because it's really a lot built. It's very iterative, right? And so really at each iteration, you are testing for these three and you are adjusting your strategy, and doing so is what will keep you on track. And so you really will have to keep iterating and make sure you're always in the fine middle balance of desirability, desirability, viability, and feasibility. And so that's what I wanted to add, that it's very iterative, and you always will keep iterating until you just to make sure that you are always in the middle of these three very important quadrants, I would say.
Yeah, and also I wanted to add that with these three, sometimes you might not, at a goal at the beginning, you might not be able to tackle all at the same time. You can start with one, probably desirability, and then you can see later, you can look at how you can infuse feasibility and viability into what you're looking. So just to add to what Kofi and Dr. Domja just spoke about.
Maybe we can put William Murithi on the spot as well. William is a very experienced entrepreneurship professor from Kenya.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if William can speak now, but.
Hello, William. Can you hear us?
I know he was texting earlier, so maybe, I don't know, maybe it's audio.
Yeah. Oh, okay. He says it's in a noisy place. So
All right.
okay, thank you very much for the responses, Dr. Gordon, Kofi, and Theodore. Do we have any more questions? If not, I would ask Dr. Gordon to give closing comments, and then we can end the meeting. Dr. Gordon, over to you.
Oh, thank you, William, and thank you, William. Thank you, Matthew, and everybody else. It's very fascinating because, you know, MIT is a world leader in entrepreneurship. In fact, I need to find this material. I once came across something that said that if you looked at the most successful companies, tech companies in the world, I think more than 50% of them came from MIT or something like that. I have to double check, so don't quote me on it, but it's a world leader in entrepreneurship. And so when they take a slant at anything, it's really important to try to understand the perspective. So my lessons from this is that perhaps we need to look at traditional design thinking methodology and maybe up it up a notch, right? Because the Eppinger material is very technical material, but that's also what a lot of, that is the blueprint for user-led innovation development across the world. I mean, if you take any large company, they probably use Eppinger's book in developing innovation. So to see that as sort of the blueprint for a design thinking course is very, very interesting. Obviously, very technical. In fact, I'm teaching the new product development course again this semester, and we were working on target specifications today. And the students were struggling. So, so you can imagine taking that to a regular workshop setting. People will be like, huh? Do what? Marginal values for what? Metrics. It's quite technical, but I think it's a call for us to figure out how we can, ways in which we can sort of up the game a little bit beyond our traditional, sometimes fluffy, design thinking methodology of creating these very happy infographics and just out of good intuition, name an insight, and I'm not belittling any of that. I think there's real value in coming together as a team and developing an insight, but maybe also looking at ways of bringing a little bit more science into the evaluation of the characteristics and the specifications that go into analyzing the insights from the field could help. There are so many ways of simplifying a lot of the things in Eppinger's book. So my lesson here is that it's a call for us to maybe tighten things a little bit. Just in closing, I would also like to, I think Emmanuel and William made some new points. So Emmanuel said, thank you, Dr. I like the trial illustration. You made an example of cost structure and revenue components of the BM. The explanation is quite detailed, and I thank you to Kofi. It's really about finding a fine balance among the triad. Iteration is key. Grateful. Wonderful. And then William also said, but will agree, he's in a noisy place, but he will agree with the suggestion from an investor's perspective, the three, which is the viability, feasibility, and viability and desirability are tests that require some testing. No automatic pass until you can provide metrics or evidence to determine desirability, feasibility, and viability. That's great. yeah, so thank you so much, everybody. And it's always great to, you know, take a stab at these issues, and we're especially grateful this month for Dr. Abi and Philip for sharing their lessons. They didn't talk about the cost of this course, but I won't spoil it. It is really expensive.
Bro.
Yes, I shouldn't say it, eh? I shouldn't say it. Okay, yeah. But it's very expensive. You can look it up. MIT Executive Education. MIT. What is it called? What's the name of the course again? Mastering
Design Thinking. I think.
Mastering Design Thinking. Yes, you should take it, but you have to be ready. Thank you so much. And yeah, William also says, oh, William, you see, William spoiled it. William has put a number in the chat. I didn't want to say
that's
it,
not the complete number though. There's more to it. It has some additions.
Oh, there's more. Oh, it's more expensive than that. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So there we have it. Very expensive course. And for those who are interested, please definitely look it up. Mastering Design Thinking at MIT Executive Education. Thank you, everybody. Over to you, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Warden. Yes, so I just want to thank everybody for making time and then joining us this evening. So as we always do, make the recording available so you can always visit it. And then if you have any questions, any concerns, you can always write back to us. And hope to see you next month in our October meetup. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Have a good evening. Bye.
Good evening.